Hey everybody, Peter here again. An episode of Dawn Patrol. That's our kind of working name for our video cast, if you will. Nothing too fancy here. Absolute special guest, David Yates, crew member of HMS Antrim during the Falklands War. Please welcome, David. In what little interaction I've had with you, it's been very, very fun talking to you. And the book, I think your personality comes through very well in the book. I don't know if that was an intentional thing.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Okay, good. Because you seem like somebody I would have thrown a few pints back with and probably gotten
Yeah.
in trouble.
Oh, indeed.
So that, yeah, I was I was very surprised that the openness of the book is very, 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 and of course the book is Bomb Alley. When was the original production edition? Do you remember the original print version?
2006 it came out.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
Just in time for the 25th anniversary.
So we're actually up to, it looks like the most recent was 2013. Is that the fourth edition then, I guess you would call it?
No, the fifth edition was just this year for the 40th anniversary.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, with a special edition chapter.
Okay. Oh, very good. I might need to get a physical copy because I think the Kindle one might be.
Yeah, and the additional chapter basically answered all the questions people have asked me over the years. You know.
Oh,
what happened to the ship, and what happened to the girl, and what happened to this.
I was going to ask, but I also wanted to not stick my foot in my mouth. So yes. Hey, you said no holds barred, right? So,
that's right.
So speaking of your childhood trauma of the laughing sailor, what was your view of entering the Royal Navy? I mean, you obviously had some family members that were either Royal Navy or Air Force. Just what were you thinking going in? Did you look at it more as a career or a job at that point? It sounded like it was like twice as much salary as most of the jobs in the area at the time.
Yeah.
How, just what were you, if you can recall or even remember? I know it's been.
Yeah. Well, my best friend from school, he joined the Navy straight from school, and we'd meet up when he was on leave, and he'd talk about his amazing stories,
right,
and I'd talk about my boring stories,
right,
life in Civvy Street, and 17, having some sort of family issues,
right,
that being the eldest child and family issues with my father and stuff, and I wanted to leave home desperately, and that seemed like a safe umbrella for whatever future lay ahead,
So speaking of looking ahead, I mean, would you even have imagined remotely that the Falklands War would have occurred at that point? Just if you remember any of your thoughts about that, did you ever think back at,
Well, I'd not consciously heard of it,
right.
The Falklands. I mean, I did. In the book, a lot of us said, "Well, where's the Falklands?"
Right.
I thought it was somewhere in Scotland. Or, what the hell are we going up there? And that wasn't actually that crazy because, going to the Falklands, we thought, oh, was there some issue going on with the Russian Navy? Have we got to go from Gibraltar up to the north of Scotland, as we had done before a number of times, to go and photograph the Kiev or one of the other big ships, coming out of out from around Russian ports. But it wasn't that. It was completely the opposite direction. It was a real surprise. I mean, we sold some destroyers to the Argentinians, and one of those had been berthed near us in Portsmouth.
Right.
We'd been ashore with their sailors.
I spoke to Jorge Boveda of Argentina, and his father actually was one of those individuals that was there for that, and he with the Type 42, right?
That's right. Santisma Trinidad.
Yeah, Trinidad. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had it was a little surreal because he had very fond memories of being in the UK, and I go ahead, continue with what you were saying.
So. No. So he's probably the guy who owes me a drink, by the way.
Probably. I'll find out.
And they sailed really quickly. They were there was I forget exactly what happened a long time ago, but they sailed much sooner than they should have done, and they left all sorts of stuff behind. So there was all sorts of stuff left on the dockside, push bikes, bicycles, distraught girlfriends, and all sorts of stuff that were left. And off she sailed, and that it was just one of the things afterwards. We thought, oh, no wonder, no wonder she sailed so quickly. But it was a real shock when we were in Gibraltar and the war suddenly kicked off. It shouldn't have been. It shouldn't have been that shock to anybody, because they, our Secret Service or foreign diplomats or somebody should have picked up on what was going on in Argentina, and
right,
it
so
should not have been surprised at all.
You were in the middle of a training operation, right?
Yeah. I mean, that was lucky. I mean, that was with a NATO force, great big force. We were lucky. We were all there at the time, and it enabled us to get right on it, and within a couple of days or so, we were off sailing south. Whereas if we'd been dispersed and we hadn't been in an operational training phase, then it would have taken longer to get a fleet together. But to our own.
In those early stages, how convinced were you that it was not going to happen? Potentially. Do you remember how you were feeling at the time, and maybe what?
Yeah, well,
what was the bet pool? I guess would be another way.
So we didn't have mobile phones and constant news service. So, and of course, once we'd left Gibraltar and Gibraltar waters, we were out of immediate news feed. So we had to rely on what was being fed to us by the command. And we were told every night, there were so-and-so diplomatic missions taking place, and this had happened. But ultimately, and to their great credit, and I say it in the book, command left us in no uncertain terms. We're going down. We must be prepared to fight a war. We must be prepared. We cannot rely on politicians sorting this out. We may have to do it for them. And that's what happened.
Do you remember before you left Gibraltar, or even apart, there was inklings of the conflict during the exercises, right? Where you were doing like CCAT firing exercises too, I think it was mentioned.
Well, we did lots of exercises, and we were training for all sorts of scenarios, invariably against our friends. Against our friends, the Russians.
Totally right, but so what I was getting at there was whether or not there was any time that was actually used specifically to prepare. Was there any training that occurred amongst that exercise specific to the potential of the conflict, or were you pretty much just told to go at that?
Well, if there was, we certainly weren't told about it.
Okay. There might have been.
And I would have written that in. I would have written that.
Yeah. No. Very good. So take me up through Ascension. So Ascension Island, it doesn't have a deep port, right? So it looked like. So about how far? I mean, I don't know if you remember this at all, but do you remember how far out, and do you remember how far away from the island you anchored, or I mean, were you like?
Yeah, I would guess would be a couple of miles. I mean, I live on an island, and when I go across to Portsmouth, every time I go across, that is when I feel the most emotional. Really, is going back over to Portsmouth and remembering coming back. I know it's winding the story right on. But being able to judge distances and thinking, yeah, we were about 2 miles off the shore, and I've got some photographs in my scrapbook, and they show that, and the sea was really, really warm, but we were warned not to go in it because of sharks.
That's right. You were talking about
whatever.
Creatures. Yeah. Okay.
And I read that little funny bit, and that's true. That's a real funny, quite a funny story. But it's dead true. It was a young officer.
So you did make it. You did go on island for a certain period of time, though, right? Is that right?
No. Some of the very few lads did. Probably the flight crew from memory would have gone on, and possibly, there would have been some gone on, but not myself.
All right, so they would have offboarded the Humphrey, the Wessex. So
Yeah,
is that right?
I guess so. Yeah,
Yeah, probably for getting a couple extra essentials and yeah,
yeah.
logistically. Interesting, very good. So do you so which ships and I should have looked this up before I talked to you, but so which ships did you leave Ascension with? Were you with the first main body with
Oh,
Woodward?
yeah,
Was it
we were
the
the
last
most
group?
advanced group. Yeah.
Right. But did you leave for South Georgia um, ahead of that task group, or pretty much
Oh,
right
yeah,
after?
yeah. We broke away.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we broke away.
And do you remember at all how, I mean, just how long that voyage was from Ascension to South Georgia? How long that took you? Was that about two weeks?
Well, it's from the let's think. It's from I think it's about 9 days from memory.
Okay.
I'm like, it's in the book, I've written down.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Sure.
of course, we didn't go hell for leather, straight.
Yeah.
We had to
Yeah.
go
Well, you
down
don't
in
want
a,
to overtax the engines.
yeah, yeah, have to go
Right.
down. Well, not just that. It was, of operational reasons. We couldn't
Mm,
beam down into a trap or whatever. Our
okay.
biggest fear, once it started, the reality was kicking in of what were our biggest threats. Okay,
Right.
the Air Force, they had big Air Force, and we didn't have aircraft detection frigates as such. One of my previous ships had been a aircraft detection frigate, but we'd
Okay.
phased that ship out. It was in mothballs. But our other big concern was submarines. They had a couple of submarines, and that one, the Santa Fe, that was down there, and we could have sunk us. Could have had
Speak,
us.
Speaking of submarine threats, was there any? I've read in different books. There was some concern even at Ascension Island in that phase. There was some concern potentially even. I think Argentina had like personal submarine crafts and so forth. Was there any general concern about Argentina attacking at all during that phase of the operation at all that you remember?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's not rocket science to think that, well, if they know the task force coming down, they
Right.
know where we're coming from. So,
Mhm.
draw a straight line from Ascension Isles down to South Georgia and the Falkland Islands, and anywhere in between there, we're going to cross those waters. So that's kind of the gist we got. That was the fear.
Right. We might talk about it later, but
Yeah,
there was a mission planned to attack the QE2. It was scrapped. It was scrapped by Argentina because of I think it's because of the oil lifespan of the Skyhawks, right? So the
yeah, yeah,
A4, yeah, the A4Qs, they would have breakdowns anyway, but they were thinking that just their long distance to go all the way up and then potentially come across over
yeah.
from probably around the Buenos Aires area it was too much.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, they had been thinking of certain tactics there. So bring me up through South Georgia. It seemed Antrim was right in the thick of it, right? It was the flagship for
Yeah,
that operation. Not only, of course, uh, there is a story in there about your love of Sandy, right? Was that we won't besmirch the those that have passed on, but
no, no, no.
um, what what had your opinion at the time been of leadership in general? Maybe we'll stay away from just very specific individuals, but I could
Yeah,
tell
that's
that
fine.
I could tell you had a deep appreciation of your own captain. Maybe
Yeah.
let's talk about that. What type of interactions did you have with your captain and him with the crew in general, and how did that play into your morale up to that point
Well, the
of South?
captain was very experienced,
Okay.
um, very confident, quite calm, assured, but really, and he obviously was at the top. He's our skipper, but the guy who really inspired us was the commander, his number two, and we had a TV every evening, broadcasts to the ship's company, and it was on those broadcasts that I said in the book, it was like a rugby or football coach,
Okay.
somebody coaching us along, particularly in the bad times, and giving us, sometimes having to give us, not a bollocking because we'd done something wrong.
Right.
We hadn't, but you're not going to do anything wrong. He didn't sort of say, "Oh, we're going to be the best, and we're doing this because it's our duty, and because I want us all to survive." That's
right. And
we all went back.
Do you feel like there was a level of honesty there as well? Like, do you feel like your trust was high in that regard? Yeah. It seemed that came across in the book.
And that did, again, without having to go at anybody, and other ships were unlucky. Other ships, perhaps operationally, weren't up to speed as much as we were. Maybe we were lucky. Maybe we were just dead lucky. But I kind of feel that it wasn't just luck. It was down to good command and control and good
training.
Yeah, good training. The whole lot, the fear of going in the water, that temperature,
right?
That does something for your reactions, I tell you. And that's why I put that chapter in there. There's a couple of unique chapters in there. One is the tank, the damage control tank, which I've never. People don't. They skim over it and talk a little bit about it.
Right.
And I address it in a kind of a light-hearted way, but it's in there, and it's a key part of naval training, a very key part.
It instilled. It instilled. I would even say it instilled the fear, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean, the other unique chapter is the crossing the line ceremony, because that's really light-hearted, but that's a naval tradition, part of it. It's I believe, the most comprehensive chapter on crossing the line ever written. There is a book, Neptune and the Polywogs, it's called, written all about crossing the line ceremonies, but it doesn't really cover it in as much detail as my one does. And I did it with a bit of the benefit of hindsight, because on a later ship in the Gulf War, I was a chief petty officer, and I organised a crossing the line ceremony, and I played King Neptune. So when it came to write this book, I could draw on personal experience, not just from memories of my own sort of lower part in the war.
Do you have any pictures of that? Or are they all burned?
No. If you go onto YouTube, and type in HMS Exeter, crossing the line ceremony, and up it comes. And when King Neptune comes out from the quarterdeck with long hair, that's me.
Oh, cool. So you had your long hair phase in the early 90s. That's what you're talking.
Yeah, well, this was false hair, made out of rope. Made out of rope and combed through,
I was thinking you just got a little hippie in your middle age, right?
But joking aside, but important, humor in a naval ship is important. Humor in the trenches, humor in any conflict, being able to keep your head straight despite what's going on, very important, very, very important. And I put it in the book. I only encountered two men on the ship who cracked, really.
Right.
And that's not bad out of way over 500 men. That's pretty good.
Antrim it's a large ship, right? It was one of the larger ships that took part.
A crew of 480, plus the embarked forces, so that took it up to 630.
So there were several instances in the book where you had to appropriate goods from in particular, I remember South Georgia. Interestingly enough, I felt like your book filled in the blanks very well for Operation Parakeet. You explained things very, very well, even tactically. So did you research did you have to do a significant amount of research for the book as well? I know obviously you took part as well, but did you have to do did you have to kind of fill in the blanks for yourself as well on why certain things were happening, or what, what I'm getting at?
Right. What I did is a personal account. Okay. So the way it happened was I kept a diary. I'd never kept a diary before. My dad, however, had. We've just been reading some of them. He kept a diary from the age of 14 in 1936 right through to when he died at 63. And I've just been reading those. And I knew he kept diaries. I never did until the Falklands War. And then the moment it kicked off, I thought, right, this is it. I am going to start keeping a diary. I didn't have a book or a diary I could write in. I literally got some plain paper, stapled it together, and made diary entries. I also kept copies of daily orders, anything I could, memorabilia. I only had a small camera, so I couldn't take a lot of photographs. I only have one reel of film, so I kind of used that sparingly. And then I just kept all this information. I wrote to my parents back home. Obviously, the communication lag meant that, it was weeks before they got the letter, weeks before I got a letter back. But basically, I asked them to keep any newspapers relevant to the conflict, and I would, do something with them when I got back. When I got back, I had this pile of newspapers about 1 meter high, about 3 foot high. And I went through the newspapers, took out everything to do with the Falklands War. I had 11 weeks leave after the Falklands War. 11 weeks. Not all of that was legal. Okay. I managed to swindle some of that.
Yeah. Okay.
But I was due about 6 and I swindled the other 5 with approval. Anyway, okay. So I had all this time, and I got all these newspapers, my diaries, all the memorabilia, and I started putting together a scrapbook. That became 2, that became 3, because there was so much information. And that was it. And then I thought I would just, I don't know, something to look back on when I became an old geezer, But then the following year, we had a little reunion, just me and my chief and one of the other blokes in our office. And of course, going to a reunion, I took along the diaries. And other people at that little reunion said, oh, you must someday turn that into a book. And every year thereafter, I took the diaries along, and more and more people would say, yeah, you must do something with this, And it was only when I left the Navy and I got a job on the oil rigs in the North Sea that I finally had the time to do just that.
Get together.
And I started writing. When I say I did a little bit of research, I didn't want to be put off the aim of the book, which was my personal account.
Yeah, I think you wove it together.
I was extremely lucky to be on a lucky ship, but also to have lucky things happen to me. There were some things that, people said, well, how come you were able to wander around the ship during action station? Well, that was my job. That was my job to do that. If I'd have been stuck down in a magazine or, in the forecastle of the ship, I wouldn't have seen all the things I saw. I was put in charge of the Chilean scrap metal merchants. Other things happened. It was just lucky. I was just lucky.
I was going to
took advantage of that, Right.
I mean,
and then what really helped the book was that I was based up in Scotland, and I was on an oil rig, so I was 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And when I was off, I joined a writer's circle in Aberdeen, and I sat next to a lady who was about 20 years older than me. In fact, she's 22 years older than me. And I said, she asked the question. She said, what are you writing this for? Do you want to get published? Is it just for your memoirs or what? I said, well, yeah, I'd like to get published, really. I'd like to get the story to be tidied up as much as possible, and to, record as much information as I can remember now, Anyway, she took it on to be my proofreader, and she is a member of Mensa. She's still alive, and that was one of the big things about the book and the writing and reading process. We recruited not just men, not just blokes who'd served on the ship. There were a couple. One was a senior officer, to look at it from a sort of a strategic sort of, watch what you're saying sort of thing. Most of the readers were women. Most of them were women. And that's what I feel gives the book such balance, because they ask the questions. You know,
That's
I
very
didn't
interesting.
record everything in my diary, but they asked the questions about how did you do your laundry? How did you feel when this happened?
That's
You know,
really interesting.
that's what gives it balance.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting. I
Because
don't think I've
I
ever
think
heard.
it's unusual. I bet if you read most war books are
Right.
kind of written by blokes,
Right.
you know, critiqued by blokes, and that's why you kind of get a blokey thing. And most women, when they come to look at a war book, they go like that. Whereas a lot of women read mine and they get engaged with it. I've got some very good reviews from women.
Yeah, it's very personal,
Yeah,
and it's broad, and it covers every. It covers the in between a little bit. It covers down below well too, right? Just
yeah,
as far as being kind of that isolate that. I remember. I guess we can go ahead and kind of move forward
yeah,
into the bomb alley situation itself. Um, you were one of the lead ships.
yeah.
There hadn't been a tremendous amount of minesweeping involved, right?
No,
The level of minesweeping was what, was it ardent, just kind of
yeah.
going like this for a
Well,
while?
we were afraid of that. You know, I mentioned that in the
Yeah.
book as well. You know, there was a fear, and you know, a couple of times when we hit small icebergs, and that, my God, that puts the fear of God in you.
Hmm.
You know, think you're going to hit an iceberg or a mine, and you know, ooh, yeah, yeah,
I remember there's a little there's you used sound well too throughout, I think. And I remember I think you were saying the ship was getting hit. Um, and you just couldn't hear it, right? Or it was
yeah,
so muffled, or yeah, it would be soaked by the frame of the ship.
yeah,
Um, I there was one I won't reveal too many parts of the book, but I do remember um, you trying to bring some brevity to the situation of moving back and forth as you were hearing the yellow
yeah,
alerts and the red alerts, right? And
yeah, yeah,
which I found very interesting, and your use of uh, your use of the pantries and so forth to
yeah,
as a shield. I thought that was
yeah,
brilliant, and it's just it's just those nice little personal touches. I think it's
yeah. It brings it home
one
to
of
what it's like.
it's one of the more enjoyable Falklands books I've read. I think because of that, it's more of an enjoyable read. Um, those personal touches. So speaking of luck, Antrim, obviously the one bit of unluck was getting hit by a 1,000-pound bomb, and of course you couldn't really know, or you didn't know too much about it as it happened, but there are moments later where it kind of it was a somewhat of a stroke of luck, right? You kind of described it as, well, we did our frontline duty, and then unfortunately you kind of had to stick around. I know towards the end of the book in particular, there's it's a very interesting account because it kind of goes a little bit more into,
Yeah,
and then what, you know what I mean, it kind of goes a little bit more into
yeah.
the
That's what I wanted to
wow.
do.
Yeah.
A lot of conflicts are all about boredom. You know, a lot of boredom. Even in Ukraine now, you know, there's lots of action going on and everything, but there's a lot of boredom where you're waiting and oh, crikey, you know, I wish something would
Yeah.
happen, you know. And
Well,
then when it
right,
happens,
but
it
then you
happens. You know.
realize what you're but then you kind of realize, well, okay, maybe I'm okay. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, I want something to happen, but I don't want anything too much to happen.
yeah,
So it was very interesting, your accounts of then coming up to, I can't remember the exact ship, when you had gone back to South Georgia, right,
yeah,
to become the toting boat, or whatever, however you want to put it.
yeah. Post office
Um,
ship.
and yeah, what was that the ship, that the RFA, the
Saxonia.
yeah, that's it. Okay. And I just
I'll never
remember,
forget it. I've never been so cold.
oh really? Okay. Oh, that's right. Yeah, you were mentioning, like, literally having to climb up a good 30 feet
Yeah,
or more
yeah,
on
yeah,
the
yeah. On a Jacob's ladder, yeah.
well, the one thing I think that your account of that kind of like later stage of the conflict was how cold it was getting, right? And how
Oh
different
yeah,
it even was between that moment and the original operation to retake
yeah,
South Georgia, and that it had changed so significantly,
yeah,
um, and how difficult the war would have been if it was prolonged any more than it was.
yeah,
Did you ever reflect on that? It seems like
yeah. I do. I mean, if they'd have held back, and I don't know why they invaded when they did, but if they'd have just thought about the weather and attacked a bit later, then it would have been that much more difficult for us to counterattack. Because going down the South Atlantic in the winter is not easy.
so in
So
some ways
yeah, they missed a chance there.
it's almost like of course, in retrospect, we almost have to thank those Chilean scrap metal workers because they kind of instigated it earlier than
Yeah,
it
that's right.
likely.
Yeah,
I mean, there's so many. That's to me, that's what's so interesting about this. It's like it's a conflict that should not have happened, but it did. And
yeah,
what I've always found most interesting about it is just, and this is for both sides, how everyone just kind of brought their A game to it. They just kind of everybody was just innovative and just kind of
yeah,
it was an unfortunate situation for both countries, I feel.
yeah, yeah.
And of course, I'm very happy that you got through it to provide us the insight here. I had one question I had written down. What was your favorite book that you read during the Falklands War? It's an odd question, but
No. We read loads and loads of books, and I read a series, the Sven Hassel,
okay.
March Battalion, Liquidate Paris, all of those.
Ah,
Have you ever
okay.
heard of him? He died a few years ago, but they were great reads. I've still got a set above my head. Yeah, I remember
Um,
reading those. I don't remember. I think I read some von Daniken stuff about uh, monsters from Mars, and we
so
would,
you stayed from anything too deep,
yeah,
right?
we'd read anything. And there was only a limited number of books,
Right.
and a good daunt, a good joke was to kind of rip the back page out and write on the preceding page, to find out the ending. Contact.
No, no,
And
you
it was
didn't.
roughly 3 tins.
Oh wow,
Often
that's
the
horrible.
final page was missing.
Did you hear anybody like yell on the
Yeah.
ship? Yeah.
So after a while, if you got a book, you always check the back page was in there.
Okay. Yeah, I did have some questions. I did have some additional questions. Um, Matelow, right? Is that
Matlow.
from? Is that
Matlow.
Natlow? That's how you pronounce it.
We,
Okay.
we say Matlow, but it's a French
Yeah,
Matelot.
Natlow.
Matelot is a
And that's
French.
just for seamen, right? That's just for able seamen level.
No, all of us. We all call ourselves Matlows.
Okay. All right. And
Matlows.
that was
Yeah.
just from tradition, or
Yeah.
just tradition?
They probably
Okay.
still call them now. Yeah, Matlows. Yeah.
Okay. There was one point. There was one reference to steamies. It was in near the front of the book where you were tripping over piles of steamies and
Yeah.
other deck string clutter.
Steaming
What?
bats. They're called steaming bats. So steaming goes back for the terminology of when ships were powered by steam, and so you'd steam from one port to another. And the shoes you wore, your boots you wore on a ship were steaming boots, and
Okay.
there was steaming bats. Bats is a name for boots. So yeah.
Okay.
And if you
Interesting.
had, I mean, I knew a guy with he was only 5'9" or 10, and yet he had like size 13 shoes. So he was almost like a circus clown. And instead of being called Peter or David or whatever his real name was, he was called Bats, Bat Puma, because of his big feet. You see,
Nice. And a gaffa, is that a form of coffee?
No. A goffer is a wave. You know, getting goffered is a wave. So if you're on the upper deck, on the upper scupper, and there's a wave hits the ship, and you get a splash in that's a goffer, and you've been goffered. And so
Okay.
anything to do with waves, liquid, a goffer, a drink.
Okay.
So
All
that's
right.
why.
See, I'm learning a lot here. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
learning the Queen's or the King's English.
yeah.
Um,
It's amazing the amount of naval language that has
yes.
gone from the Navy into
Yes.
common use.
Son of a
Common use.
gun and so forth.
All
Right.
sorts of things.
Yep.
All sorts of things. Every year they add, new words to the English Oxford Dictionary, and some of those make me chuckle. I think, well, we were using that in the Navy 30, 50 years ago, and then now it's coming to common use.
Being keel hauled and so forth.
Yeah.
What, if anything, do you regret from the conflict? Just anything that you regret in general. Doesn't have to be about any portion of it, but
Not me personally. I mean, I've had some relations who are now died, and they sort of didn't like what I'd said. Felt I was being why did I write things that you should have kept them private and things like that. And I'm glad I did write them. It's a book about life on board a warship, and it's got warts and all. One great review I had from the Naval Museum, and they say they wish they had something like my book, from the Battle of Trafalgar. All they have from the Battle of Trafalgar is the accounts of the senior officers, politicians, and the equivalent of journalists at the time. They don't really have any accounts. I mean, I think there's one guy, Jack Nastyface is his name, and I think that's about the only account. But it's not in the sort of detail I'd written. And if they had that sort of account, so it's important to write these things down. In terms of regret, not me personally, but I there's a chapter in there. I mean, it's not the chat. I didn't. Black Day at Grytviken. It's been called. I was advised to change the title. I was advised to change some of the wording because of the incident of the shooting of the Argentine prisoner.
Right.
I was not happy with that, and a lot of us weren't. We were not.
I think that's the first time I've read a full account of that and how it made
that. And it's not really the full account. I had to watch what it say, and I still do.
I had meant to ask that as well. Your letters and even your scrapbook or anything like that. Were you advised to not share certain things for a certain period of time? Were there, like, especially with the letters? I'm assuming the letters.
When we got back, I mean, in a way, when I wrote the account, I couldn't reveal anything which I felt was going to be, classified information, because I wasn't subject to classified information. I haven't talked about stuff that I don't know about, or maybe later on in my naval career, I've come to know of stuff, but I wouldn't have written about that. I wrote it from a lower deck point of view, as I was at that time. So I didn't, and when one of my senior officers, he read the account in draft format, and he said, no, it's fine. He said, there's nothing in there which you need to take out. He said, no, it's absolutely fine. It's all sort of common knowledge, what you wrote about. So no problem. I was just advised to watch my wording on that one chapter.
Right. I can understand that, of course.
And I still to this day found it quite disturbing that could happen.
Right. But the other part of around that time was, after that had occurred, or it might have even been very, very near that time point, where the captain of Santa Fe or the commander of Santa Fe kind of come over for dinner. I thought that was
Yeah, that day, yeah.
That was that was very British.
Oh, yeah. And that was in complete contrast to what happened the following day, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, just crazy. You know, when I'm in you can probably tell I'm in a small office, and I've tried to put it over to, I've sort of explained it as best I could in the book without going really hard hitting. Yeah. But in a small compartment, when you've got two armed guys and one unarmed person, why the hell do you have to shoot him 5 times?
Right.
Why? Right. Why don't you just put your gun down, point to the gun, or anything, grab hold of him, do anything. Shoot him 5 times?
Yeah.
What? Mm-hmm. You know, if they treated all our prisoners like that, what a crazy world we'd be in. If war resorted to that, we could shoot all the prisoners the following day for any excuse. That goes really against my morals.
So I'm just making sure I didn't miss anything.
But no, you know, no regrets about in the war. A funny thing, you know, in the there's loads of funny stories, there's loads of funny follow-ups. So, you know, I talk about coming back into Portsmouth.
Right.
And I didn't have a uniform, okay, because I'd been promoted while I was away. So I couldn't go on the upper deck to join everybody else. And I was stood outside the wardroom, and I got invited into the wardroom by a friend of mine. And there was none of the officers in there. And we were knelt on seats and looking out these large square windows. And he said to me, "Do you want a drink?" And it's all in the book. And I thought he meant, I don't know, a goth or a soft drink or something. And he said, you know, from the bar, you know. Oh, right, okay. So, you know, large gin and tonic or whatever it was. And then he said, "Oh, I'll need to chit it to somebody. I'll need to put it on one of the officers' accounts." And because I'd run the officers' bar for a while, I knew who drank gin. So I got him to put it on the commander's drinks chit. Commander's drinks chit. I mean, I go, ugh. If I had been discovered there, and oh my God. Anyway, when I was on the oil rig writing this many years later, and my routine was I'd have I was down on the bottom of the oil platform in my office, typing away. Then I'd go up at lunchtime with a draft, and I'd sit there, and after I'd had my meal, I'd then sit there and I'd read the draft with a red pen, and I'd start correcting it. Okay, so I was up there doing this draft reading, and on the table in front of me was a pile of newspapers and magazines. And this is just kind of freaky, really. I just started flicking through the papers and magazines, and one of them, I just almost collapsed with disbelief. There was a picture of the commander. He was featured in a news article. He was still in naval uniform. This is years after the Falklands War. Mm-hmm. He was still in naval uniform, and he was Scottish anyway, and he was based up somewhere, and they were doing a feature on him working with sea cadets or something. And there was this picture of him, and he was kind of looking at me, and he was sort of going, "I know what you did, Yates. I know I had a lot of gin on my mess bill that month."
That's funny.
And then one of the great pleasures afterwards was when the book came out, and so I suppose it'd be about 2009, and I went to a reunion, and he was there with the captain, and it was fantastic. It's the last time I saw the captain, last time I saw the commander, and I apologized to him.
Oh,
and I pointed to I gave him a copy of the book for a start, free copy. I gave them both a copy, and I marked in there the bit when I, stolen.
Signed it.
So I made sure I bought him both of them gin and tonics.
Awesome. Recommend. Very good. Oh, that's great. So, what was the first meal you had when you hit shore? Was it Kentucky Fried Chicken?
Kentucky Fried Chicken, yeah. When you're away, you any soldiers, any troops, sailors, whatever, and you're away and you fantasize about meals. You literally lie there, oh, I can't wait to get back. I can't wait to go and get a haircut. I can't wait to
Right.
get this from my favorite meal. I can't wait to have a drink. And I got all three, in Portsmouth, and it was just brilliant.
Right.
And KFC still is. I can't drive past the KFC
without stopping, without getting a bucket.
No, cannot think about it. It's unbelievable.
I thought one of the funny, again, I won't reveal too much, but one of the funny things was that you gave the Argentine, or was it the metal workers? You gave them Antrim shirts.
Oh yeah, that was a good thing. That, and again, that's where the commander was good like that, because he, I was put in charge of them, and I wasn't put it this way, I wasn't good. You wouldn't have found me shooting any of them. Right. I'd have got into an arm wrestle. I'd have had a fight with them if they were aggressive, but I was no way would I have, have done anything like that. And I just really palled up with them. The war for them was over, and we had a great laugh. It was a real party those few days. And I played a joke on them. I played a joke on them, which just everybody who saw it thought it was hilarious. Dressing them up in HMS Antrim t-shirts and then leading them off to go off the ship. They didn't know. And they would have arrived back in Buenos Aires. They probably still got those t-shirts.
They probably kept them. Speaking of, did you keep any other souvenirs from the conflict? Did you have a helmet?
Yeah, my sister's still got the helmet.
Oh wow.
Yeah, the sister's still got the helmet. I've got copies of all the books that have come out. As a book comes out, I tend to get them, and just to support the author, really. And I see the same sort of mistakes in all the books I've read, apart from some of the really polished ones, where the guys have kind of rushed into having them published, and they can see that they haven't had them widely read before going to print. And they don't get that balance. They don't answer all the questions, and you're left reading it going, oh, this is a bit, I wish they put this. They haven't done themselves justice, but that's through just inexperience. I learned the hard way. I got rejected 35 times before that book was published. 35 times, and it was taken on eventually by Pen and Sword, who'd rejected it several months before. J.K. Rowling, famously, I think she was rejected for Harry Potter about 26 times. And eventually, Bloomsbury, I think it is, they took the book on. And that was the second time of asking. And she did the same sort of thing as me. She polished and she polished and she polished.
What were some of the reasons they were giving during these rejections, or were they even?
Well, one of the really good ones was, I've told this story so many times. This very well-educated man over in Portsmouth, he read it. Somebody had advised he was a literary agent or something. Anyway, he wrote this very snotty letter to me, and he said, and I've still got it. He said that there is no way this book will ever be published. There is far too much vulgar language in it, far too much swearing. Right, so I thought, oh God, I better pay attention to what he's saying. So I then happened to be reading a writer's magazine a couple of weeks later, and there was an article in there on expletives, and it gave a whole list of expletives. And then I got to my thesaurus, got the dictionary out, and I looked up other expletives, and I literally got a list. And then I went through the draft, and as I came to a swear word, I look at the list, and I go, oh, I'll take that word out and put this one in. And so I completely changed the feel of the thing. Right. So when I eventually got the phone call from Pen and Sword, and I was working on somebody's roof outside up in Aberdeen, and the guy said, you may want to sit down while I tell you this news. So I sat down on a window ledge, and he said, right, we're really interested now in taking this on. And we'd like to offer you a publishing contract, blah, blah, blah. And then he said, and do you mind me asking, the use of swear words in the Navy, he said, some of the words seem a bit strange. They seem a bit stunted. And I told him this story. He said, oh, don't worry. He said, well, we'll put some proper naval language back in there. When it got printed, I now look at Bomb Alley and I think, I don't remember swearing then. I don't remember putting a swear word in there. So the editors have gone back in and put more swear words. Still not quite crude as we would have spoken, perhaps.
They thought that
But
was
the
your
report
voice,
was,
right?
That was one of the issues. But a lot of publishers, if you're an unnamed, I used to say, if I was David Beckham, they'd just bit my arm off and they'd have printed this, no problem, and they'd have employed somebody to go over it and all that. But when you're an unknown author, it's hard. It's really hard. But the best thing I did was find, polish, and then recruiting somebody and paying them to do it, to go through and give it a professional critique and a professional report. And then for me to, when I'd sent off that, the manuscripts after that, I'd send a copy of that report with it, and I'd say what I've done to listen to the report or not. Sometimes I said, she said this, but I haven't changed it because of that. And I immediately struck gold.
So what was your happiest memory from the conflict? That's a weird thing to ask, but do you remember anything that sticks out in your brain as just a happy moment?
Well, I mean, you can break the whole thing down into different phases, and the happy times, like when the bomb is finally cut out and dropped off the side of the ship. To see the heads, the toilets, where the bomb had kind of obliterated everything, and there's one John, I think you call it, as a WC, that's sort of left unscathed, right. And the guy was sat in there, and you think, oh my god. But I think the coming home from a conflict is brilliant. Coming home from a conflict on a naval warship is something else. That is something else. I mean, it's stepping off a plane or coming off like a troop ship or something where you're all just steaming over the gangway, but coming back on a warship, that is something else. That is, and it's still to this day, I get emotional just thinking about it, going back over to Portsmouth and what the day was like. It's just amazing. Just brilliant.
Did you have other ships saluting you as you were coming in? So,
oh yeah, it was massive, and it's in the latest edition. Actually, talks about the homecoming. It's reckoned to be the largest homecoming ever for a British ship, which sounds a bit of a boast. And you think, wow, that Falklands War wasn't particularly big, but in the Second World War, they didn't know when ships were coming back. They just literally came in. The beaches were all shut off, were all barbed wire. Right. We came back on the day of the World Cup final, football final, soccer as you call it. It was the hottest day of the year. The school children had just broken up from school. The beaches were packed. Everybody knew we were coming in. We arrived at Spithead. We were anchored overnight, so everybody had time to build up for it. So when we came in, we had a massive homecoming. It was unbelievable. Really
did they plan it one ship? Did they plan it one ship at a time, or were you a part of?
Yeah, we didn't come back. I mean, there may have been a couple of ships coming at a time on other occasions, but no, we came back on our own.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, it was just an incredible day.
Okay. Any other? I mean, do you know of any other Antrim crew members who have written or still plan to write anything about the conflict?
Or one of our senior officers, he wasn't a senior officer then, but he went on to become a very senior officer, Mike Parry, and he's written a book called Down South. But it's it's a typical officer's account of the conflict. It doesn't touch the personal notes that I do. Well, how could it? He didn't live in the lower deck like I did. He had the high japes in the wardroom and stuff like that, but they not the same as high japes in a mess deck, on a warship.
So now that you are officially the J.K. Rowling of Falkland authors, did you have any other aspirations to do follow-ups? You had mentioned the Gulf War. Have you ever
this was a very strange year that we're just nearing the end of. I mean, I've lost a lot of relations. We've had the 40th anniversary of the the Gulf War, and the 40th anniversary of the Falklands War, and also we passed the 30th anniversary of the Gulf War. And I kept a diary for that as well. And what I did was on Facebook and on a few sites, and a lot of Americans had visibility of those sites, and I posted my daily entry, and just from 30 years ago, and I just elaborated on them a bit, and I posted pictures of memorabilia and just photographs and whatever. And some people have said, "Oh yeah, you should turn this into a bit of a book," but there's not enough there. There's not enough to talk about. I'm quite happy just to leave it at that with that one. I do, however, I've got some manuscripts on my left-hand side here. I was a catering manager in the Navy, so I'm intending to do a catering book, the Laughing Sailor's Cookery book, because in Bomb Alley there is a list of dishes, and I'm taking some of those dishes, and then I'm going to take the reader through my naval career. So each ship or shore base I served on, there will be a dish and an anecdote. Funny, they're all humorous, there's nothing dark, all humorous stuff. And jokes as well. Each page will have a joke, and cartoons. My wife's an illustrator and a publisher. So that sort of thing is there. And I've got others here as well. Different stuff. So I'm not.
When you're ready to release that, tell me. We'll talk.
Yeah. Oh, don't worry.
Yeah.
Well, I'm even kind of crazily thinking of books normally get published one at a time. You don't normally hear of mass publications, but I'm seriously thinking of doing at least 5 on the same day.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, and they'll all be different, but just somebody releasing 5 books on the same day. A lot of people say that's crazy. You'll be splitting the market. Yeah, but imagine the attention I'll get. My wife is an illustrator, a graphic designer. She could do this. I can do it. So
you'll be your own competition. So hey, it's better. You might as well be your own.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Once they're written, what have we got to lose?
Right.
Apart from getting sued.
I think we'll wrap up there if you're good.
Yep.
Dave. And it's been an honor and a pleasure talking to you, about your time on Antrim. And I appreciate very much you talking about the book, and I appreciate, and others have too. Here, I'll post one of the comments that it's a very personal account. I think very detailed as well. In particular, I think you wove in, not the facts around the reality well.
Yeah.
Throughout.
Yeah.
Obviously, you showed the humor very well. But I thought you were also, forthcoming with what you were feeling throughout. I mean, not always the easiest thing for a guy to do, right? Is to kind of open up emotionally about it. And I thought you were, I thought it was a pleasantly open book, and I particularly enjoyed hearing that you had a significant amount of female editors and readers. So that was a very interesting point.
Yeah.
And I think it does come across in the book positively. It's a great book, Bomb Alley by David Yates. Please pick up a copy. And thank you again. Have a good one.
And anybody wants a signed copy, or what I can do is I can do a signature, and I don't know, I'd sign something, and because I can transmit it across the water, and then they can stick that in the front of the book, whatever. I'll do anything to help people along.
Very good.
Answer any questions. Can I say one final word?
Yeah, absolutely.
I bear no malice against the Argentinians. No malice at all against them. We fought against them. They started it. We finished it. I've met Argentinians. I've met a fighter pilot who actually, I'm not saying he bombed us, but he was in Bomb Alley. I've met Falkland Islanders. I've met lots of people from different viewpoints. And people say to me, do you think the Falklands War will ever happen again? And sadly, it may do. It may do. I say to Argentinians, I say to anybody, if all the people in Argentina, all the non-native people go back to Spain, Portugal or wherever they came from, or the millions of them, then that's when we would ask all the Falkland Islanders to come back to the United Kingdom or Ireland or wherever they came from, their ancestors. And it would be the same as in America. You know, if everybody in America went back to wherever their ancestors came from, you know, there's no chance of that happening. There's no chance of Argentina ever taking the Falklands. What I would do if I was Argentinian, I would be looking to form close bonds with the Falkland Islanders. I was thinking of this today. If I was Argentinian, I'd be sending, I don't know, I'd send plane loads of women over there to marry the Falkland Islanders or whatever, you know, in crossbreed or whatever you want to call it. You know, they're your neighbors. You've got to get on with them. And likewise, the other side of the foot, we have got to get on with Argentina. They are next door to us, next door to those Falkland Islands. But they reserve the right for self-determination. So, but I bear them no ill will. I wish both sides, everybody, a peaceful future.
I've heard very similar from everyone I've talked to from Argentina that it was an unfortunate conflict at an unfortunate time, and unfortunately, we bear the scars of it, right?
Yeah, we do
in some ways. So, good point, great points, David. Appreciate it again, and thank you very much for taking your time to join.
Thanks very much for your time, Peter.